morning. Welcome to Winchester Unitarian Society, a wellspring of progressive religion in the Mystic Valley. I'm Peter McEntee, a member of this congregation, and happy to be serving as your worship associate this morning. Unitarian Universalism is a religion without a creed. We come from many different religious backgrounds: Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, and even atheists like myself. What unites us is not a list of required beliefs, but a collection of agreed upon principles that guide us as we live our lives in this community and in the world. After today's worship service, all are invited for coffee and conversation in the Sims room back there. And as the church year gets underway, new volunteers are needed for the Meals and Rides Committee, work led by Gay Moorbacher. Look for Gay at coffee hour. Gay, are you here? Yep. Look for her at the coffee hour in Sims as she helps to get help putting homemade meals aside in the church freezer. She even has some sample recipes for you. And now, let us prepare our hearts and minds for worship.
So before we prepare our hearts or minds, or maybe speaking of preparing for worship, you all have seen now that I'm formally dressed in a suit jacket because it's really warm in here and I'm going to take this off now. Because I would like to be comfortable so I can be fully present with you as opposed to being uncomfortable. All right. There we go. Now for our invocation. Thresholds. We cross them every day, from room to room, from outside to inside, and back again. From here to there, from anywhere to everywhere, from age to age. Each threshold offers an opportunity for change, for renewal, for transformation, from what we were and what we are to what we can be. In this hour and in this place, we cross a threshold from our day-to-day everydayness into space and time attuned to the other, to the sacred, to the holy, into an awareness of new life pregnant with possibilities. How will we be renewed in this moment? How will we be changed by this hour? How will we be transformed through this gathering of beloved community? Come, let us worship together. I now invite Cora McVeigh to come forward to light our chalice. Our chalice lighting words this morning. Go ahead. This chalice is for the living, the changing, the becoming. This chalice is for losing the script of your life, the chapters about who you are and other people's stories. This chalice is for the lost GPS that was supposed to show you how to get to where you expected to go. This chalice is for skipping the directions, coloring outside the lines, painting, not by the number, but by silence, by wild abandon, with a brush you made yourself from light deep inside. Startling, vivid, a new voice that already knows you, finally, a true story. Thank you. Now let us rise in spirit or in body and sing our opening hymn, number 298, Wake Now My Senses.
I would like to invite those who are young and young at heart to come forward for a story. Good morning, everybody. Come on up. Have a seat. Jeremiah, have a seat. All right. So, welcome, everybody. So great to see you here. Some of you may remember when I talked about change with you last week. If you were here last week, I talked about sometimes it's hard to accept change, especially if change means you have to give something up that you really like. I mentioned some changes going on here at WUS and also going on in all of our churches, all of our Unitarian Universalist churches. In WUS, we said goodbye to Heather, Reverend Heather, and welcome Reverend Seth. Say hi to Reverend Seth. So Reverend Seth is a great person. He's fun and smart and cool, super cool. But he isn't Reverend Heather. He's different, right? Yeah, and he's your dad, Elias, right? He's your dad. He's not cool. Elias says he's not cool, so. All right. So it will take us some time to get used to the difference between Heather and Seth, right? It'll be a little time for us to get to know Seth better. And that's all going to be good. So I also mentioned about changes in the UU churches. One thing that is changing is a pretty big thing. It's a change to how we talk about and express our values. Instead of the 7 or 8 principles or promises, if you know Spirit Play, we call them promises, right? But now we have a different way that shows what's most important to us. So since change can be hard to get used to, over the next few weeks, I'm going to talk with all of you about some ways of remembering this big change. So I'm first going to share this picture with you. You can see it up on the screen. Does everybody see that? Okay. So this is one design, and there are lots of designs because we are UUs after all. So we have lots of opinions about how things should look. So this is one way of showing how the new expression of our values is organized. I talked last week about how love is at the center. Can you see love at the center there in that picture, right? Love is always at the center of our values. So this means that as UUs, we want to begin again in love, again and again in love. One way to remember this value and all the others is to use our hands and numbers 0 through 6. Even though there's no actual order to these values, no one is better or more important than another. We can use the numbers to help us remember each one and what it means. So first, I want to ask you to use your hands to make a circle. Can you all do this? Okay, yeah. So we made a circle. You might remember that one of our youth wrote something that is now on a plaque in our new pollinator garden. It says, "Let my love be like a circle, no beginning and no end." So our love is a circle. Who knows which number is a circle? Anybody? Which number? May. 0. 0 is a circle, right? So when we're counting, we start with 0, our circle, our love for one another. Okay, so that brings me to the next value, and the one that we're going to really focus on today. That is the value of transformation. Who knows what transformation means? Jeremiah?
It means
Right, turning into something different, right? Changing, right? Yes. So to remember this, take your hands and make a fist. Just one hand, sorry. Take one hand and make a fist, okay? Now I want you to slowly curl your finger, your pointer finger up, like the unfurling of a sprout into a plant. That is number 1, right? That's also number 1. It's a plant, it's transformation, it's number 1. So it means changing, and this is a way to remember the value of transformation, right? This is our value, like a new sprout growing up from the ground, transforming from a seed into a plant. It means that we are transformers. Are there any transformers among us? Is Optimus Prime among us anywhere? Yeah, somebody got that joke. Somebody down here in front got that joke. Yes, Otto and Olsen got that joke. You're right. So seriously, though, just like the Autobots change into cars from robots and change the world, transformation changes us as a person, a community, and a world into something better. So like all change, transformation can be hard. It can be really hard, but it can also be fun, full of discovery and learning, making new friends and trying new things. The best thing that we can do to transform is to remember that we're all trying our best and that we are loved. At the center of it all, we are loved. So let's make like transformers and bring our best effort to transforming ourselves, our community, and our world into something better. Are you with me? All right. I invite the grown-ups to sing the children to religious education. The words are in your order of service.
In case anyone was wondering, Elias was also holding up a sheet of paper with other words he had thought about me earlier in the service. Apparently, I'm not his favorite person today. It's hard coming back to church after a summer away. All right, time for our meditation. We enter now into a time of meditation and reflection with these words from Lynn Cox titled, "The Heart of Both and." Spirit of life, ever adapting and renewing, we come together this morning with yearnings that do not match. We yearn for stability, for even one moment of feeling like we know what is going on, for the ability to predict and prepare for what is coming next. Yet we also yearn for change. We ache for a world that turns aside from racism, violence, dehumanization, and disregard for suffering. We pray for a change in the illness, grief, isolation, incarceration, and vulnerability of our loved ones. We reach for connections that will remind us that we are worthy as we are, and we reach for connections that will help us to become our best selves. Hold us in the heart of both and. Cradle us in the mystery. Cherish us in the eternal presence of love, and encourage us on the path of growth and development. As individuals and as a people, help us to become who we are called to be. Lead us to open pathways to deeper wisdom through reconciliation, self-respect, and mutual respect. Compassion, owning and making amends for mistakes. Source of wonder, move us to express and live in gratitude for the beauty of this world, the loving people in our lives, and this day of possibility. To this we add the meditations of our hearts as we enter in a moment into a time of silence. Before we move into that silence, though, we are invited to light a candle in recognition of the joys and sorrows in our hearts. For our young friends have departed. Interesting. Okay. Anyway, we are invited to come forward and light a candle over there at the table next to the lectern. If you would like a candle brought to you, please raise your hand, and Peter will bring a candle to your pew. After we kindle the light, we will be together for a time of silence and then sing hymn number 1002, Comfort Me. Let us now kindle the light.
This is an excerpt from When All You've Ever Wanted Isn't Enough by Rabbi Harold Kushner. I was sitting on a beach one summer day watching two children, a boy and a girl, playing in the sand. They were hard at work building an elaborate sandcastle by the water's edge with gates and towers and moats and internal passages. Just when they had nearly finished their project, a big wave came along and knocked it down, reducing it to a heap of wet sand. I expected the children to burst into tears, devastated by what had happened to all their hard work. But they surprised me. Instead, they ran up the shore away from the water, laughing and holding hands, and sat down to build another sandcastle. I realized that they had taught me an important lesson. All the things in our lives, all the complicated structures we spend so much time and energy creating, are built on sand. Only our relationships to other people endure. Sooner or later, the wave will come along and knock down what we have worked so hard to build up. When that happens, only the person who has somebody's hand to hold will be able to laugh.
Most of us want to have some place, maybe more than one place, where we belong. It feels good when you feel like you belong somewhere. We feel seen, valued, appreciated. We feel at home, comfortable, relaxed. We could go so far as to say we have a human need to belong, to feel connected in that way. In a world where people change, where we change, where our communities change, it is important, though, to understand what it means to belong. For some of us, perhaps many of us, have made the mistake of thinking that belonging means that everything is exactly the way we like it, that everything is exactly the way I or you like it. Because this is what we experience in the world more and more frequently these days, right? If you go to order something online, you don't just have to pick the one out. You can pick the color, you can pick the shape, you can customize so much these days to get it exactly the way that you want, which is really cool in a lot of ways. Yay, all capitalism. It's nice. But if you went off your day-to-day experience, you might think that belonging in a community means having everything personalized exactly the way you want it. And that's not as much the case. Because belonging, as it turns out, is not dependent on everything being tailored to fit your needs. Belonging, according to researcher and author Brené Brown, is about being accepted for who you are. When you belong, you get to be you. In contrast, she suggests, fitting in is about being accepted for being like everyone else. When you are fitting in, you have to change your behavior or change your clothes or change your persona to be like other people so that you fit in. When you belong somewhere, you want to be there and they want you. When you fit in somewhere, they tend to care less one way or the other. Where is a place that you feel like you belong? And then, as you think of that place, how does it make you feel like you know that you belong there? I hope that you have at least one of those places in your life, if not more than one. And I also hope that this place here, the Winchester Unitarian Society, is one of those places. Because at our best, Winchester Unitarian Society and Unitarian Universalism more broadly offers belonging. We want you to be here, just the way you are, just for being you. Now, what happens when we're not at our best is a whole different sermon, but for this morning, we'll stick to the ideal scenario. When we're at our best, we want you to be here without having to change who you are to fit in. And this is fantastic. It's one of the great strengths of our faith tradition. Sometimes, though, we conflate, we confuse, we consider belonging to mean I'm comfortable because things are the way I like them to be. And so then when something changes that we don't like, we feel like we belong less. Or maybe even, depending on what the change is, we might feel like we don't belong anymore. Except that the church community still wants you to be here, just the way you are. What we're often experiencing in these moments when things change is that we've been taken outside our comfort zone. And being outside your comfort zone, it's uncomfortable. It's also okay. Being outside of our comfort zone is often how we grow and learn. And when we go through changes as a church community, some of us might start to feel like we don't belong anymore. And that's where I would really challenge you to look at what belonging means and to consider what you're actually feeling. Because being pushed out of your comfort zone and community does not mean that you don't belong. Changed rituals or changes in technology or any other changes, they don't mean that you are not welcome or that the church is asking you to change to fit in. Now, noticing the difference between being outside your comfort zone and feeling like we don't belong can get especially tricky when our church communities challenge us to learn and grow. Because that's actually the role of a religious community sometimes. There's an old saying you might have heard before that the role of church in our lives is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. If you encounter a time where our church community is challenging you to learn and grow, maybe perhaps if we're doing some anti-racism work or talking about white supremacy culture or any other number of anti-oppression activities, if you experience one of these pushing moments and you feel outside of your comfort zone and you maybe start to question whether or not you belong, I hope you can pause for a moment and consider whether the issue is belonging or growth and learning. Now, I offer all this up for your consideration because as your interim minister, a big part of my job is to help you, the collective you, do the work of change. Whether you know it or not, you have literally hired me to come in and help you make the changes you need to be ready and prepared for your next settled minister. And so as I help you do this work of change, as we do the work together, you might at times begin to feel like you are out of your comfort zone. That's normal, and hopefully we'll all be able to manage it when that happens. But if you start to feel like you don't belong here anymore, I hope you remember this service and take a moment to reflect on what's really going on. And maybe reach out to someone, another member of the congregation, a pastoral care associate, or me, and talk about what's happening if you need to. Because while it could be true that so many things have changed that you have to change who you are to fit in, more often we confuse the discomfort of change with feeling like we don't belong. And this is really important because if you stay totally comfortable over the next 2 years, if nothing of consequence changes and everything stays pretty much the same, we will have failed in the work you have hired me to do. Now, don't get me wrong, not all change has to be uncomfortable. I sure hope some of the changes we make together will feel good or exciting or hopeful. But if you've ever met human beings, you know that most of us aren't huge fans of change, even when we know in our heads or even in our hearts that it's necessary. Our hearts will often protest or get angry about or feel sad about things we know need to happen in our heads, including changes to things we really care about, like this gathered community. Now, if this sounds unpleasant and really unexciting to you, that's fine. I get it. I'm not a huge fan of change myself. I'm actually someone who really likes my rituals and routines. We have 2 dogs, and they tell you in seminary you're not supposed to say the word dog in a sermon because then people start thinking about their dogs and get totally distracted. So if you need to do that, go have your little moment about dogs and then please come back. Okay, so we're back to me and my dogs, and I take them on a walk every morning, and I go around the same block every day, right? Now, we live in a really nice neighborhood. There's many blocks. There's all sorts of paths. And even there's part of my head that's like, ooh, wouldn't it be nice to check out? But no, I like my routine, right? Same block every morning I walk the dogs. So I get it. I like routine. I like things to be the same. I know it can be uncomfortable to change. But here's the thing. Change isn't just something the Winchester Unitarian Society needs to wrestle with right now. As we all know, change was thrust upon us by the pandemic. It's like that wave from the reading that came and knocked down all of our sandcastles that we had been so hard at work building, except that no one laughed. We were all like, WTF. If you don't know what that acronym stands for, I'm not going to say it out loud now. Come ask me afterwards. And so while all things are really starting to feel like we're getting back to normal, we're really returning to a new normal. Whether we go build a sandcastle in a new spot, or rebuild on the foundations of the old sandcastles that we've been working on, we can never rebuild the sandcastle of our lives exactly the way it was. Things are never going back to exactly like they were pre-pandemic, which is a really good thing in some ways, and maybe unexciting in others. But the important thing to remember is that we have choices to make about how we are going to adapt to the changing world circumstances around us. And so the real question to me is, how do we do that? How do we adapt to the changing circumstances around us? Whether it's the pandemic in the larger world, the transition from one settled minister to the next, how do we adapt to the changing circumstances in a way that carries forward the beliefs and values that lay at the heart of some of the specific practices and forms we've been accustomed to? Let me share a story to tell you what I mean by that. There was a church, a Protestant church, located in the Washington, D.C. area about 10 years ago now, I think, that realized it was having a problem. they had a tradition that was beloved in their community of sharing a meal every Wednesday evening, a potluck, that was at the heart of their church life. It was when they did surveys, when they talked to people anecdotally, it was the thing that was most treasured was this time of gathering together. The problem was that the church was in the heart of Washington, D.C., and traffic was getting worse and worse, and they were drawing from a broader and broader geographic circumference around them, and it was getting harder and harder for people to show up for this meal that was so important. And so they did what churches do. They formed a committee, and they thought about it and did some studying and talked to people. And what they realized was that the value that was most important to them was sharing bread together, breaking bread, having a meal, right? That was the thing that was most important. But the form was less important. And so what they did to make things better, to make it work for their changing circumstances around them, was they started what they called zip code dinners. So instead of gathering all together on Wednesday night, they would gather in zip codes. They had a location in each zip code so that it was easier for folks, especially families with kids, to get to the zip code location. And they weren't able to gather all together, but they still broke bread together. They still shared that meal together as a church in a different form. And so this is what I hope we can come to understand the work of interim ministry to be. It is not my job to come in and change the essence of who you are or to turn you into something you're not. My job is to come in and help you rediscover, remember, reconnect to that essence of who you are, separate from Reverend Heather, and to become aware again of who you are as Winchester Unitarian Society on your own. And then we will look together at all the things you're doing now, and we see what's working well and what's not. And we keep the things that are working well. We lean into those strengths, and we celebrate them. And then we take a longer look at some of the things that aren't working as well, and maybe we just drop a couple of them if they aren't working well and we don't seem to care that much. And then we look at those things that are in line with our values but aren't working in their current form, and we see how we can, like that church in D.C., carry forward the essence of what's important, while maybe changing the form to meet the current needs and the current circumstances. So this has been a lot about church and community and church life. And I trust that you all can make the connections to our own lives. I'm not going to take a lot of time this morning to explore that specifically, but this is true of our own lives as well. Change happens all around us. Our life circumstances change. And we can figure out what's important to us, what we need to carry forward, either in the same form or in a different form, so that we can live into our values and live into what is most important in our lives. And as we undertake this work together these next 2 years of getting ready for your next settled minister, there's a couple things I want you to keep in mind that will be important. The first one, I'm feeling the stories this morning, so I'm going to share another story to illustrate before I tell you what it is. So you're going to have to pay attention and see if you can figure out what it is, this thing I'm talking about. So the story is about, this story happened a long time ago with a woman in a village, and she had always wanted children and had never had any. And then she got married to a man who had a son. And she's like, oh, this is great. I'm so excited I finally get to be a mom, and I'm gonna do all sorts of things, it's just gonna be wonderful. And so she made him a whole brand new outfit, carefully sewed it together, and presented it to him. And he hated it, and he ripped the stitching apart, and said, I don't want this, you're not my mom, was really upset. And she was despondent. And she tried a couple other things over the next week, and he just was, really unhappy, and she didn't know what to do. And so she went, as people in these kinds of stories tend to do, to see an old wise person whose house was far outside the village. And she said, what can I do? I really want to be a mother to this child. What can I do to make our relationship better? Is there anything you can do to help me? And the wise person said, well, there is a potion I can make for you that will make this situation better. But what I need from you to be able to make that potion is I need you to bring me a whisker from a living lion. She says, what does that mean? It means like a whisker, not one from a dead lion, right? But a living lion. I need you to get a whisker that has been taken from a living lion. And then I can make you the potion. And she said, really? Yes. Oh, okay. And so she thought about it, and she knew that there was a lion. The villagers all knew that there was a lion that lived far outside the village. And after a couple days, she formulated a plan. And so the next night, she went out to near where they knew the lion lived with some meat, some raw meat, and threw it at the lion and ran away. Didn't even see what happened. And the next night, she took some more meat and went out just a little less far than she went, threw the meat to the lion, and ran back. And so she repeated this over the course of 2 months, a long time, until on the final night, she just took the meat out and dropped it in front of her because the lion had come to get the meat. Right, bit by bit, the lion had come closer and closer. And on that last night, she reached out and gently pet its head and plucked the whisker, and then slammed the door, because, if you pluck a whisker off a lion, even if it likes you, right? But she got the whisker from a living lion. And so, the next day, she went to the healer's house, and to the wise person's house, and she said, here it is. Finally, I have the whisker of the lion from the living lion. Will you make the potion for me, please? It's awful, right? My son does not love me. And so the wise person took the whisker and threw it in the fire, and it burned up. And the woman was like, what did you do? For 2 months I worked for that. And the wise person said, if you can show as much patience and caring and love to your son as you used when you got the whisker from the lion, then he will learn to love you, and you will learn to love him. And so, my friends, that is what I hope we can bring to the next couple of years together, and to any change process we're going through, really. To be like the mother in the story, to be patient, because change often takes time. And change in church often really takes time, because let's be real, things move slowly in the church sometimes, right? So we need to be patient, and we also need to bring love and care into the equation, because we will have times where the change process will be uncomfortable, even if sometimes in our heart we know it's the right thing to do. And so I ask if we can bring, and me too, because change is hard for me too, right? That we can all be patient and have love in our hearts as we do this work together. Because even though it might be hard at times, this is collectively where we need to go, because you do want another settled minister. And then, in addition to patience, love, and care, we will also need to rely on each other. As we heard from Harold Kushner in our reading earlier, all the things in our lives, all the complicated structures we spend so much time and energy creating are built on sand. Only our relationships to other people endure. Sooner or later, the wave will come along and knock down what we have worked so hard to build up. When that happens, only the person who has somebody's hand to hold will be able to laugh. Now, laughing might not always be the most appropriate response, so we might change that to say only the person who has somebody's hand to hold will be able to be resilient. Might be my rephrasing of that. But the point remains. We are going to need each other as we are going about this work of adapting to the changing circumstances around us. As we go about this work of adapting to the changes needed in this community. We're going to need each other. You are going to need one another, because change is hard. My dear friends, whether you are happy about it or not, things will continue to change. This community will continue to change. My job is to help you, to help us, be intentional about the change process these next 2 years, and to guide the changes in directions that are in line with your beliefs and your values. I hope you will come with me on that journey. If not willingly, I'll take grudgingly. But most of all, I hope that as we travel together these next 2 years, that you can live with the occasional discomfort without losing your sense of belonging here. Because no structural or cosmetic change can change the fact that we want you to be here just for who you are, just because you are you. We might challenge you along the way. We might ask you to grow and learn alongside us, but we love and value you because you, changes or not, belong here. Amen.
We've arrived at the time in our service for the offering. You know what to do. You know why we do it. With our tradition of share the plate, 1/2 of all collected funds that are not explicitly designated as being for your pledge or for some other specific purpose are donated to other organizations whose aims align with our values. Today, we share our gifts with the Council of Social Concern, which is headquartered in Woburn. A description of the organization and what they do is in your order of service. Your generously given offering will now be gratefully received. Those who wish to do so are invited to join in the unison affirmation. We gather not for ourselves alone, but to use our common power to build the beloved community within and beyond these walls. We create and reaffirm this covenant this day to make justice flourish, to practice compassion amidst difference, and to embody transformative love. Now, please rise in body or in spirit and sing the hymn, Life Calls Us On. The words and music to this are printed in an insert in your order of service.
on. Oh, there we go. I popped in. Hey. Life calls us on, right? Even in the face of change, life calls us on and love calls us on. As we heard in our first reflection, love is at the center. Whether you're going with the wave and sandcastle metaphor with friendship, or whether you're going with a parent loving their child, or any other metaphor, love is at the center, and it is what will carry us through all of the challenges and all of the good times together. Go and be blessed and be a blessing. Amen.
Please say with me the words for extinguishing the chalice printed in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Today's service is ended, but our life of service continues. Let's continue the conversation in the Sims room.